Alright, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. Apologies for being a couple minutes late, but a couple of the subs at Osmo.com are keeping me engaged in a scintillating conversation about some of the plays tonight. As has become my wont, let's discuss last night for a few minutes while people file into the room, and then should still have plenty of time to break down a one-game slate. Yeah, I don't know what the plan is specifically yet, actually, for Summer League preseason, all that stuff. But yeah, it has been a nice bankroll builder. Not unlike the postseason, you have just fewer people paying attention. The people say some kind things about the effort I put in there, which is very nice, but it has probably more to do with the fact that when basketball is the sport of sports for the majority of the winter, you have tons of very intelligent people. A lot of my colleagues in the industry are very smart and really know what they're doing, giving advice on dozens of websites and Twitter feeds and so on and so forth, and you just have a much more educated populace. In theory, in the preseason or the summer league, what I do would end up being more valuable, not because I'm particularly any better, but just from the fact that people are more dumb, put mildly. And I mean that as nicely as possible, but to say the percentage of people who have a full view of the slate and have spent the time and are themselves or getting the information from somewhere that is looking into everything you should be looking into is smaller, and people are playing their baseball or what have you. And so that just generally makes it just an easier time to make money. I think it is the largest factor. Also the fact that it's just not the same ball of wax. Summer League, there's a lot more about, coaching tendencies, and there's just a lot more research that goes into it, knowing who's going to play, and you can't do it quite on your ass as much as you can a lot of regular season basketball for those reasons. Once you're 5 months into the regular season, the last month it gets a little squirrely, the beginning some things are new, but it's a little easier to go through it, putting in less time, and with so many resources that generally do a pretty good job. So yeah, last night I didn't see the Brolo thing coming. He was great on both ends. Took the most shots on the team by 5. Put up 21 shots. We'll talk about it more on tomorrow's show, where I have a chance to rewatch the entirety of that game. But I try not to dismiss things as a fluke just because I didn't see them coming. Try not to make the same mistake twice, I think, is a better way to look at it. So I didn't hate him. Again, I had him in both cash and GPP of the lineups that I built for FanDuel yesterday, where he was just too cheap, and there were guys I certainly disliked more. Chris Middleton at his price, who I expected to struggle and see a majority of Kawhi, and that's the way that went down. And some of that production was based to just got an unreasonable amount of offensive rebounds and putbacks. Couple more blocks than you would expect in a vacuum, but a lot of it was very solidly built. Full credit should be given for the fact that he played really well on both ends. He didn't make it more of an issue when he had to share time on the court with Mirotic, who sort of predictably struggled. Again, there's no one out there for Mirotic to guard. It's not so much his fault, but spoke at some length on the show yesterday where I worry about Mirotic in this spot, that he's going to have trouble continuing to see his minutes. He was the only one of the starters on Milwaukee, I think, to post a negative and plus minus, and that's not particularly surprising. When they run their starters out against the Toronto Stars, there's no one there that he should be guarding, that he's going to try to guard. But accepting Brolo, most of that went the way that I thought it should. Said we should bet the under on yesterday's game. That worked out. Though it was touch and go for a while. The pace for large portions of that game was crazy. They were track meeting it, but they managed to come in at the under at the end of the day. Said that I thought the Raptors would get out to a hot start. I don't remember exactly what numbers I gave, but I said something to the effect of, watch carefully. The Raptors are going to be up, 20-10 after 5 minutes or some number like that. And that's about what happened. And then they pulled Miro out and stabilized a little bit, and there's definitely a role for him there, but especially when you have him out there next to Lopez it's going to be interesting. If he's out there playing nominal center or out there next to Giannis playing center, there's more defensive configurations that are going to work out. But that ended up being about how we thought it would go. Especially one-game slates, things like the Brook Lopez game are unforgiving in that, he was on FanDuel, he was significantly owned. Because, again, he was just too cheap. I think he was $7,500 last night. So he ended up being 40-something% owned, and with him vastly exceeding my expectations. I had him at about 30 minutes and 30 fantasy points. I had him a little under Marc Gasol, who had a fine game himself. But when he goes out and throws up a 50-burger at that price on a one-game slate, it's basically going to be a do you have him or don't you have him situation. And again, we'll spend more time on this tomorrow. But to break it down, the reasons for my concern were, I think, fairly obvious. One, he had generally struggled in the matchup with Marc Gasol over the course of many, many years. Again, the Gasols and the Lopezes, besides making a great buddy cop movie at some point, I think Rolo would be the star of that one, have played against each other a lot, both inter and intra brother confrontations, and Marc Gasol had generally gotten the better in this situation. And secondly, this is not a great matchup whether you look at it from their ability to defend the 3-point line or having Marc Gasol down low. This doesn't, at a first glance, look like a situation in which you think, okay, Brolo is going to eat here. But so that's the and you can look at the last series where Joel Embiid is almost, there are very few basketball players in the world who are strictly better basketball players. If you compare, Ryan Hollins and LeBron, okay, LeBron's going to be better at just about everything. But if you compare Embiid and Brook Lopez, for example, Embiid is better at just about everything. Brook Lopez is a better 3-point shooter. That might be it. Embiid may literally be a better offensive and defensive rebounder, passer, rebounder. Like, you could literally list the sum set of skills required as a basketball player. Brolo getting close as far as rim protection and blocking shots, but Embiid still has him there by a pretty good case. And Embiid had just played 7 games in this matchup, and had been well below his average. I only exceeded the number Brolo put up last night once, and barely. Now, obviously, Brolo costing you a whole lot less money, but the relevance here being, so that's the first glance. But the reason it isn't a fluke and my failure, as it has been so discreetly put towards me, would be in not fully understanding how Brolo would be the one to profit from other people struggling, being that Toronto made a real emphasis out of stopping Giannis, as you obviously have to. Pascal and crew are certainly able defenders, but trying to handle him one-on-one is going to be difficult, so they will fall into 2 different zones that they used over the course of the game, and he's just going to be more of a focus. Kawhi is going to spend most of his time guarding Middleton, so that's going to make it a little harder for him to function offensively. And Bledsoe, we will just say, can obviously disappear, and I do think a Bledsoe ceiling game is very possible in this series. He's going to get one-on-one matchups. They are going to concentrate more directly and intentionally on Giannis, and just by extension with Kawhi being so good, limiting Chris Middleton, who only took 12 shots, I believe it was, in that game. And so someone else is going to have to get the job done. Could certainly be Mirotic. Could certainly be Bledsoe. In this case, it was Brook Lopez. Someone has to take the shots for this team. He took 21 shots. Some number of them were putbacks. I wouldn't say that if you look at the number of shots relative to their presence in the offensive game, that was an accurate representation. 4 blocks is a little high. But if you were to make a good argument for Brook Lopez, or to look at how that game went so far in his favor yesterday, it just has a lot to do with the fact that someone on this team has to score. Marc Gasol, while he was spending 100% of his attention stopping Joel Embiid, was probably looking a hell of a lot more at Giannis than he was at Brolo for a lot of that game. And Brolo can do some of his damage from the outside. He shot 4 for, 11 from 3. Mentioned on the show yesterday, if he's going to get there, it's going to be blocks and threes, and that really wasn't the case there. He rebounded extremely well. And so, some of that is small sample size. Obviously, reacting from this going tomorrow, we'll see exactly how high the price goes, exactly how owned we expect him to be. But yeah, he was absolutely massive, and I was not a huge fan of his. So your consternation, anger, your invective, your vehemence has been received and adequately noted, and that's fine. I think in retrospect, I didn't speak about him as well as I should. I didn't say he's obviously well too cheap on FanDuel, which he really was. So yeah, good criticism. I appreciate that. So let's talk about tonight's game. Obviously, moving forward to Game 2. Unlike the first game in the East, the first game in the West went pretty much how we said it would. This is a really difficult matchup for the Trailblazers. Not having Nurk is an issue. Having to sell out to stop their 2 world-class guards on Golden State creates some issues down low. As we talked about this in the Slack for the last half hour or so, and I was shocked at what Stott's tried to do. Basically, Stott's strategy of sagging off pick and rolls, and again, this has been discussed ad infinitum on Twitter, so I'm assuming most people know about it, but basically, he let Golden State run pick and rolls and let the shooter get free and shoot with no one on him repeatedly, and shockingly against 2 of the best 10 shooters in the history of the NBA. That didn't work out, giving Clay and Steph tons of open shots. I respect Terry Stotts a lot as a coach. I respect him as a player's coach. I respect him as an X's and O's coach. And I would expect something to go radically different tonight. He is a guy who likes to change stuff up. The number of years it took Nurkic to just be like, hey, we're going to give this dude 30 minutes a night as a monster was years. Because he was just a dude who, no, I want to try this in this matchup, and I want to move this guy down to center, and I'm not sure exactly what he's going to do here, but I'm pretty surprised if he doesn't do anything. And we will discuss some of the options. I'm just not going to let it go. Yeah, shit will change. I don't know what it is. We'll talk about this a little bit, but, Enes Kanter has received a fair bashing. I received not 1, but 2 supercuts of Enes Kanter playing bad defense in the first game over the course of the last 2 hours. You should take it easy on my guy. He's just not equipped to do that. Very few people are. Okay, you can take some brilliant offensive centers, put them out there. They're going to have trouble guarding Steph and Clay in this situation. This team is pretty proper fucked. I apologize for my poor language. When Kevin Durant gets back, assuming he's anywhere near 100%, if the series goes that long, and so on and so forth. But at this point, they have a real chance. And if I'm trying to win this game, and I'm Terry Stotts, and I'm happy to get any feedback on this, I'm throwing everything I can at Steph and Clay and going, you know what? You got 3 other guys on the court out there. I'm going to let Iguodala and Draymond and Bogut beat me. Those are guys who I can think, maybe they won't get there with their shots. It's not like Steph and Clay were hyper efficient. Steph shot 12 out of 23. Just rounding up on 50%, 12 out of 24 would obviously be half. Clay shot 10 of 24. It's not like these guys were hyper efficient. These were, in my opinion, slight underrepresentations of what their point totals would be in this matchup with that defense played in the amount of time they played. These were kind of down games. I had Steph predicted for about 56 in that game. I actually brought him down a little bit today because of my concerns with the blowout, because of just my assumption that the Trailblazers make life more difficult for him in any number of ways that they could do so. But, he dropped a 60 burger. That's about what you should have gotten, or a little less than you should have gotten in this situation that he was put in. Again, 9 3-pointers. He did shoot 9 of 15 from 3. That's fair to point out. But of those 15 3-pointers, 10 of them were largely uncontested, and if you've watched Steph in practice, the guy can make 60 uncontested threes in a row. So what to talk about here? Much like last game, I do think your predominant strategy lands on Curry and Thompson. I like Draymond a lot as a play. I think Draymond has a huge ceiling. I have Draymond literally 1/2 of a fantasy point projected different from Klay Thompson. And he has a similar ceiling. Someone showed me MVP Draymond on FanDuel. I don't mind that at all. I like it maybe even a little bit more than captain Draymond on DraftKings simply due to the 3 points per steal in a block. This is really a situation where you can get a 5x5 game out of Draymond. The extra minutes are going to be there due to the fact that it is the playoffs. There's a little bit of extra usage. Again, due to the fact you have obviously no Kevin Durant, no DeMarcus Cousins if you want to go that far. Guy can get out there and do some real damage. He can also be fairly absent. So I think for cash, I would actually prefer Clay. It is hard to think he doesn't take a metric number of shots. I certainly think you can argue that there's... I would say there is a better chance that the defensive pressure decreases on Clay than the defensive pressure decreases on Steph. There's a chance it stays even. There's a chance it goes the other way. But certainly the narrative, and again, 9 3-pointers is 9 3-pointers, them just going, okay, we're going to harass the living shit out of Steph. And what I mean by that specifically is you change the starting lineup, which we haven't seen yet, but I certainly would not be shocked to see a change in the starting lineup. And again, if we go back and look in Game 7, in the second half they started, I want to say it was Zach Collins and... not Evan Turner. I think they started Zach Collins and Rodney Hood, but there are obviously many pieces in play here. Same starters just came out, so there it is. Apparently I had missed it. Came out a minute ago. All right, so we can talk player by player here. That's good that we have the starters. So where to start? So this was a really bad game out of out of Lillard and McCollum. And you can make a number of excuses. They only had 1 day off, so 48 hours between the end of their long and difficult semifinal series. They had that quad overtime game. They had to jump on the plane and go on the road to Oakland. And they're going from a fine defense to a really, really good defense that's going to make life difficult for them. So it's not shocking that they struggled. And again, if we look back, let's look at the best possible lineups the last time. So the best possible lineup on DraftKings the day before yesterday was Captain Steph. Again, not shocking. Had I think 60 net, or 60 gross, 90 net, which is weird having the net higher than the gross. But put up a 60 burger, which if he was your captain, threw you out 90. Clay, Draymond. And the same thing on FanDuel, where you actually had 3 Golden State studs. Now, that's not how I built it on either one. I think on the 2, I had Clay, Steph, McCollum, and Clay, Steph, Lillard, where I presumed one of them would get into basically the top 3 scorers, which is what you're looking at there. That didn't happen. They both struggled mightily. It's not like there was a ton of blowout time there either. Those guys got, I think they lost 2.5, 3 minutes was the blowout loss for those guys, but they were not good. I'm slightly more inclined towards that lineup distribution today, but it looked about how we should. On DK, you needed Enes Kanter. On FanDuel, you didn't. On FanDuel, best was all 3 top multiplier slots, with those 3 expected to produce Golden State studs, and the 2 utility, I think they're called slots, went to Mo Harkless and Rodney Hood. And again, that was sort of what we talked about on the show, where we were a little more comfortable in that, and that I expected Golden State to run their lineup pretty deep. And no matter what they say when they asked Steve Kerr about this, because it came off as a little disrespectful. You're playing Houston in the semifinals, and you're really tightening the shit out of that rotation, and a lot of guys aren't expected to see the court. And during the show, I said, even in a blowout, but I expect guys to see time regardless. Steve Kerr is going to blow out, a million guys are going to play 10 minutes, and that's what you got. You got 8 out of Bogut, who played just the 1 shift at the start of the game. Their 4 studs, if you will, played their 30 whatever. You got 24 out of Looney, and then you got between, I think, 11 and 15 of Jerebko and McKinney and Quinn Cook and Jordan Bell. And because Portland was basically going to play double-digit minutes on 8 guys, and Golden State was going to play double-digit minutes on 11 guys, and played, I think, a total of 13, because you got the late check-ins on, I think, Damian Lee and Damian Jones. Wow, all the Damians came in for the blowout run. Welcome back for Damian Jones, by the way, who tore his pec, I think, when he was, I mean, it's easy to forget, but beginning of this year, he was the starting center for the Golden State Warriors. I have no issue with any exposure to Lillard or McCollum. I guess any exposure is a bit strong, but again, your tolerance for risk aside, there's a very real chance one of these guys has an excellent game here. It should be worth pointing out that Lillard took 12 shots in that first game, and McCollum took 19. Now, Lillard did a couple other things. Lillard had 6 dimes, McCollum had only 1. Lillard had 4 rebounds, McCollum had only 3. Lillard had 7 turnovers, McCollum had only 3. And they were both bad. So, I do think if I'm looking at, odds of hitting a dumb ceiling, like, you're going to get 60 out of one of these guys, I do think that's generally more likely out of Damian Lillard than it is out of CJ McCollum, but you are saving some money on CJ, obviously. I don't have a strong preference between the two. Again, there's let me make sure I get the prices correct before I say it. On FanDuel, you're saving $3,500 going to McCollum, and building out your FanDuel lineups is a little tough. They increased the prices on a lot of guys here. Steph Curry was $15,500, I believe. He is now $17,000. Significant. Klay Thompson was, I think, $12,500 and is now $13,000. Rodney Hood, who is an excellent piece of value, was $6,000. He's now $8,000, so that's $2,000 on him. Harkless, who will be popular, came up $500. There's, so saving to go from $16,000 from Lillard down to $12,500 for McCollum is pretty significant and allows you to get away with playing only 1 or even 0 true value guys. Again, I would start the majority of my lineups with Steph and Klay. Again, I suppose we should just take a second and just specifically confirm the shot totals here. The starters for the Warriors, Bogut took 1 shot in his 8 minutes, and he made it. Nice job, Bogut. And got there a lot based on the fact that he had 3 stocks in 8 minutes, which, for reference, is ridiculous. He would not average 15 steals and blocks if he played a 40-minute game or what have you. And his price on DK came up from, I think, $1,200 to $2,100. I don't consider him out of play on either site. I think the most likely scenario is that he again gets the 1 shift. But it's not the dude can play 25 minutes if he has to. A real interesting piece here, or at least what I consider relevant piece, is the fact that Kevon Looney popped up on the injury report, probable with a knee. Again, 60-40, he still plays his 20, 22, 24 minutes. I think that's probably most likely. But he is really replaceable on this lineup. You can play Bogut a little more. Like, it's not like playing Bogut 8 minutes to start both halves would kill the dude. You can play Jordan Bell out there. You can play Jonas Jerebko out there. You can move Draymond down to the 5 and put in, name a dude from McKinney, etc., etc. There's a lot of ways to go on this team. So, again, probable. He certainly earned it. He looked great. I'd say, 60-40, you're still getting 20-plus minutes out of Kevon Looney. But I'm not shocked if they, by having the game somewhat easily in hand, for whatever number of reasons, dial him down to fewer minutes and give those minutes to someone else. So that, combined with the fact that I do expect him to remain fairly popular, combined with the fact that he's rarely a big upside dude, I would probably come in under on Kevon Looney for that reason. Let me take a look at where we expect him to be owned approximately. And again, I have to look at our showdown projections. But I imagine we expect him to have... Right, we currently have him at 36% owned. I think I'd come in under that. there's just a number of other guys to look at. Obviously, the price on DraftKings is especially still appealing. Cash, you want to run them out there, I think that's fine. Obviously, there's some uncertainty there, but I didn't see any coaches' comments at the start of the game where, or during the press conference, rather, the pregame, where, they said he's good to go. I imagine he plays his normal time, but I don't know. I suppose I've spent enough time on Kevon Looney. But, so I imagine I'd come in a little bit under on Looney. I imagine I'd come in a little bit under on Mo Harkless. I like Mo Harkless. I think he gets about his 30 minutes again. I probably liked him more than I should have during the course of the year. He's a very decent defensive player, picks up steals and blocks, can make his open threes, has struggled in general this postseason, but had a very good game one. Again, I think the predominant likelihood is he gets his 30 minutes again. But in this particular matchup, in this spot, I don't have him projected to get more than about 27 fantasy points in those 30 minutes, and even that might be a little generous. He got, I believe it was 31 in game one, and that involved him getting 4 steals/blocks, and shooting 7 for 12 from the field, and, that was a strong performance from him. He's still cheap enough. There's no issue playing Mo Harkless. And again, we don't have him as super owned. We have him at 20%. But he costs, $600 more than Rodney Hood. He costs more than double of Seth Curry, if you want to try that. He's not that much less than Enes Kanter. He costs more than Zach Collins, who I would probably rather run out there for ownership upside considerations. I like Mo Harkless. I'm not shocked if you get 30 fantasy points in 30 minutes out of him again today, but I'm really not shocked if you get 20 fantasy points out of him in 30 minutes today, and I do expect his ownership to tick up pretty noticeably. I would probably come in under on Mo Harkless, much like I would on Kevon Looney for admittedly different reasons, but if you have questions and you're in the premium selected, thank you everyone telling me that they're starting the same starters. I got it! You're only running one lineup on DraftKings tonight. Where would you start? Right, so... Alright, so we'll just talk about some dudes here. I generally like Zach Collins. If I'm running this team, Enes Kanter plays a lot less and plays when Steph is on the bench. So, Steph is going to sit for 12, 14 minutes of this game. Enes Kanter should play almost all those minutes, plus maybe a half dozen more, and give the dude 20 minutes. I don't start him. He's going to get crushed. And again, the guy just simply doesn't have the apparatus to cover those guys out on the perimeter. Very few 7-footers do. So I don't, there are people just roasting the shit out of him, like, oh, you're bad defense. What the, I don't know. If you put, I can go out on the court against Steph Curry and do my very best to defend him. I'm going to fail abjectly, so are 99.9% of humans on Earth, counting Enes Kanter. And I can think of a half dozen systemic ways from the defenses you run to the ways you guard that Terry Stotts could attempt to remedy this problem, and most of them involve Enes Kanter playing less time. I don't know if he's going to do that. He's still starting. He's obviously fine to play. I liked him a lot before game one. Obviously on DraftKings at $4,400, that was crazy, but I think I said I had him projected for 34 minutes and 41 fantasy points, especially if McCollum and Lillard are struggling. He's going to put up some numbers. So let me talk about some other guys we haven't talked about yet, because we're down to 15 minutes or so. I like Evan Turner in tournaments. He is one of their in case of emergency break glass and deploy Evan Turner type guys. There's a chance he's terrible. He didn't randomly pull a start here. Same thing as Zach Collins. He didn't randomly pull a start here. Most likely scenario is he plays his, let's say, 18 minutes and scores in the low teens in fantasy points or something like that. But we saw when times were desperate towards the end of that last series against Denver, where they broke glass and put him out there guarding Paul Millsap for extensive periods of time, getting a little extra playmaking on the floor. Obviously, his inability to shoot the three is a bit of a detriment. But I like, basically minimum price. I think he's 34 on DK. I think he's the floor on FanDuel. I don't recall necessarily offhand, but Evan Turner I think is fine to roll out there in tournaments. It's basically the same theory with Zach Collins. They only gave him 18 minutes last game. Basically played purely backup center behind, Enes Kanter getting about 30 minutes there. I would like to see more of him. Al-Farouq Aminu is someone we've talked about. I think it's very risky. He hasn't looked great on the defensive end of the court and has never been a great offensive player. Has shot, I don't even know, 20% from three over the course of the postseason. Could you randomly get the Aminu game? Yes, that's obviously possible. He's getting the start again, so if you're looking to roll him out there, that was obviously a key piece of news you needed. But I think, it is more likely that Turner picks up some of his minutes, or Collins picks up some of his minutes, or Seth Curry picks up some of his minutes, or Rodney Hood plays even more and comes in a little earlier. Hood, while I never looked at him as a defensive player, has been pretty good. I've watched that first game twice now. He does a decent job. He's not brilliant, and it's one of the toughest matchups you can ever have. But he's long, and that does a lot. Dude's 6'7", 6'8", and gets a hand up, and did better than some of the other people. We really looked better than Lillard, certainly on defense for the vast majority of that game. So maybe those minutes step up a little bit. They're obviously making a big deal out of his role in the rotation. I'm going to go ahead and look at questions for a minute here because I'm sure I've missed something important. I'm still considering going to Vegas for Summer League. We will talk about that. You had 0% Brolo and 100% Pain. I don't know if that's autocorrect or just literally saying. Do you like Hood or Aminu on FanDuel? I generally, from a raw point sensibility, would still rather play Hood. I don't have a strong preference between the two of them in tournaments, but generally I'm probably still going to stick with Hood. Again, got whatever it was, 26 minutes in that game, and was one of the guys who actually looked halfway decent. I would be surprised if he randomly gets his time yanked and there's just places to go, and just Aminu hasn't looked good. Could he turn it on and get there? Of course, it's always a possibility. But just seems fairly unlikely here. Bell or Bogut straight up, I would play Bogut. Dre, Middleton, or Giannis and Nico, DK Cash 2-gamer. I would play Giannis and Nico. Kevin Durant at least 3 more games. I hadn't seen that. That must have somehow busted. I knew they said he was still going to be a while, and I originally said I thought Game 4 or Game 5, so we're right on that, but that sounds about right. Looney or George Hill for the 2-game slate on both Yahoo and DK GPPs. Yeah, we got that one right yesterday. I got a lot right, but it all gets demolished by Brolo went off for 50, and I wasn't a big fan, or more than 50. But yeah, I said George Hill over Pat Connaughton, and that was certainly how the minutes distributed there. I would probably play George Hill, but it's very close with him and Looney. But I think your ownership is still a little better. Hood or Aminu in the first spot on FanDuel. In the utility spot, I would generally stick with Hood. Durant will not travel with the team for games 3 and 4. Thanks very much. Appreciated. Hood or Aminu on FanDuel, higher upside. Probably Hood. Again, Aminu not taking a lot of shots. It's important when we talk about shots in that last game. Iguodala took 3 shots in 31 minutes. And I haven't mentioned him a lot, but that's not a lot. And we've done well with Iguodala so far in the offseason. First few games, I was a big fan of his. Extra minutes, extra time, a matchup in which I expected him to get more time, and he will get more shots as life becomes, presumably, a little bit more difficult for Curry and Clay. And I'm fine going back to Iguodala at this point because, again, the minutes should be there. A guy who can pick up steals and blocks, had 3 in that first game collectively. Still not quite as cheap as I'd like him to be, but we're just sort of like that whole Danny Green thing where we got there once. There's a point of equanimity, and we're sort of close to back to it there. But yeah, I'd be starting with Steph and Clay a lot and trying to pivot around that. So for example, we were talking about DK tonight. I have Steph and Clay and Lillard and 3 particular value pieces I'm interested in. If you've been listening to the show, you could probably build it from that sentence right there. FanDuel, I have Steph, Clay, McCollum, and a couple value pieces I'm interested in. And again, there's not too many brilliant ways to differentiate there. Yeah. Probable, Looney, Durant, Calf, all that news that we have. Looking at some more questions. Cantor or Iggy, FanDuel utility? I'd still run Cantor by any raw points sensibility. Cheapest guy you're taking a shot at tonight on DK? Probably Bogut at 21. I mean, take a look that I would look at and be like, yeah, that's fine. You just need Bogut. It's not impossible. You know, if Looney is 100%, the Bogut plays 20 minutes, and he can very possibly mess up the slate in that much time. I doubt I would be going much under Bogut there. I'm sorry, Bogut's 1,400. I must have the captain field selected, so he only went from 12 to 14. So I imagine Bogut's been cheaper. I would rather run Bogut than Damian Lee, Jordan Bell, Myers Leonard, Anthony Simmons, those guys. So yeah, Bogut would be the cheapest guy. I'm fine with that. And again, in a one-game slate, it is more likely that you can get away with a really cheap guy putting up a generally unimpressive score. There's a lot of people who frequently, even on larger slates, say things like, this guy only costs 3K. If he gets 15, I'm fine. No, you're not. That's asinine, and on a 6-game slate, if he gets 15 for 3K, you're generally pretty well buggered. On a one-game slate, there's a real possibility if you're playing a 6-man lineup that 5 guys are exceptional, where those 5 guys are, whatever, Steph, Clay, Draymond, McCollum, guy 6 here, can't beat Lillard because you probably can't afford that, and they're exceptional to an extent that having Bogut in there getting you 10 fantasy points for his $1,400 still maths out. That becomes proportionally much, much less likely as you add games. But, you know, the $1,000 brilliant guys who you think are going to get you somewhere in the area of 10 fantasy points are not as unappealing on a one-game slate. Put it that way. You're right, must go faster. We got 7 minutes. Fred VanVleet and Pascal or Marc Gasol and Harkless DK cash today. That would be Gasol and Harkless in cash for me, not terribly close. Bell or Jerebko or some other cheapie. I would play Bogut there. I would play Bell over Jerebko between the other two. I would still go with Bogut just because the odds of Bell getting 20 minutes are close to nil. The odds of Bogut getting 20 minutes are 20% or something. They're substantial. It's not probable, but there's a number of ways in which that works out. Draymond captain on FanDuel with Clay and McCollum, no Curry, too cute. No. You can get a game where, I mean, Clay has disappeared in these playoffs. Again, without Durant, it's a lot less likely, but you can get a game where Steph shoots 7 for 21. Clay has a big game. Draymond gets his steals and blocks, and McCollum loses. No, I don't think that's too cute. That's fine. McCollum over Cantor on FanDuel. Yeah, I'd have them really close. It certainly feels more secure. McCollum is legit probably a little underpriced on FanDuel, so I would generally prefer McCollum, I think. Weird someone left 1K on the table. But yeah, I don't hate it. With the pure modifiers on FanDuel, it's a little more likely that that's going to work out for you. A couple more questions on the Twitter sphere, although we have largely covered a lot of these. About 4 minutes to go. Okay. That's someone responded to me with, I don't like you anymore, you cost me a lot of money last night. I think that was somewhat tongue-in-cheek and whimsical, but that's fair. Again, don't make it personal. Don't come after my family. Don't whatever. It's a little frustrating for me where I've literally had people win 5 days in a row, lose on the 6th day, and get rude. That is tough for me frequently to understand, but I don't think you can have it one way and not the other, so it would be a little unfair to sit here and be like, oh, thank you for all the praise, yes, I'm so wonderful, and then have something go wrong and be like, well, you're not allowed to be upset. Like, it ends up being kind of unfair to me, but if Guy comes on the show and is like, oh, I really love Brook Lopez, and then I talk about him for 5 minutes and I'm more negative than positive, and he plays less Brook Lopez and loses money instead of making 10 grand, that he's going to be a little salty at me. So, I accept your condemnation, and will do my best going forward. That's what I got for you. Alright, we are coming down to it. I guess I'm gonna, I don't know, take a look at some things. No significant overlay on FanDuel. Again, I can't imagine that any news of particular relevance is going to break at this juncture. But we'll do our due diligence anyway. Yeah, I will speak with Tom. We have had a couple brief conversations about me literally doing live from Summer League. I think that'd be pretty nifty. A little cachet for the site. makes us look pretty good. Might be able to break some actual news, and it involves me getting a trip to Vegas. You're running Green, McCollum, Steph on FanDuel Showdown, Daddy like. I'm fine with that. Definitely swapping up the orders is a way to get a very unique lineup. If you run Clay at captain and Steph at the 2, and you have a shot of Clay getting 60 and Steph getting 57, you have a very unique lineup because most people will run Captain Steph and MVP Steph and All-Star Clay. So I think I don't think people do enough of swapping around those spots. I think most people log in and go, all right, Steph, which makes sense from any raw point sensibility, and then like Lillard or Clay or Draymond or something. I don't think there's a lot of people go like, you know what? I think this is, Cantor. You can definitely get Cantor getting 50 fantasy points in 30 minutes. That's an absolute possibility that he gets up to the second highest scoring dude. What percentage of people are going to have All-Star Cantor with the 1.5 modifier? Like 0.4%. 90 seconds left. Without naming utilities, who is your favorite 1, 2, and 3 on FanDuel Showdown? It's complicated because they're tied to the utilities. Like, my favorite 1, 2, 3 on FanDuel by raw fantasy points would end up being barely, by the way, Curry, Lillard, Thompson, who I have only a hair above Draymond, who isn't that much over McCollum. But that would leave me with, if I did it right in my head, $14,000 for the last utilities, and you got to play something kind of stany there. You got to run out Bogut Hood, I think would have. So that's one way to go. But saying like they're my favorite guys at those positions, they don't exist in a vacuum. So it's difficult, if not impossible, for me to speak of them in that context. 45 seconds, then we will take a look at some ownership. And we are there. Yeah, no, 2 shows in a row without an insane dog. It is truly lovely. All right. Counting down. Yeah. No, I have, and I will say it has been, I should have given a sports betting take. I don't know if you can still get it in because the game hasn't tipped yet. I generally would like to pick the Warriors to cover here. 6.5 is too small. They are better rested, a little deeper. I would think the line on this game should be closer to 9. I think it's about where I, off the top of my head would place it. Generally assume Vegas is well smarter than I am. It's a tough spot, though. They should really struggle on both ends of the court. Golden State, even with their injuries, runs a very, very compelling defensive set of personnel, and especially an even better system that's really good against Portland. And again, I alluded to before the last show that these series is really going to resemble the 2015-2016 series, where we actually have 4 of the same guys starting for both teams. In that series, Portland started several games with Lillard, McCollum, Harkless, Aminu, frequently Mason Plumlee at the 5, and the Warriors were running out, Steph, Clay, Iguodala, Draymond, frequently filling that last spot with whomever, depending on what year. Again, that was the last year. Sans Durant. The next year they missed a couple of games with Durant, but over the course of those 2 years, they won 8 of 9 playoff games against this team. It is a particularly brutal spot. Let's look at some ownership thingamabobs. Whoosy whatsies, howsy doozies. All righty then, the $350,000 shot, which again, $350,000 for 1-game slates. God bless America on FanDuel. Steph Curry, 70%. Yeah, I'd have more. I mean, the price is up. I could see it not working. And again, it's important not to consider things in a vacuum. Once you start playing Curry, you sort of end up with like, okay, I can't play Lillard because of, or it'd be very difficult to play Lillard because of the pricing issues it puts on you there. But 70% Curry, 63% Clay. Again, it'll be interesting to see what Stance does here, and I can't wait to go watch this game. But yeah, McCollum 46.6% to me is just too low. Again, of the guys with a real possibility of getting there, him at 12.5 is just too cheap on FanDuel. Clay is also too cheap. Both their ownerships are suspiciously a little bit low for me. I would have thought Clay was a little over 70 and McCollum was a little over 60. But he wasn't. Mo Harkless, only 30%. That's not too bad. I'd feel fine if I had Mo Harkless. 9,500 is significant. There's another number of other guys in that range who can get there. But you need him to, again, shoot well, get his steals and blocks. Maybe shoot a little bit more. Could certainly happen. And Rodney Hood, 40%. That's fine. $8,000. Again, once you got down to $8,000, there was not a lot of terribly compelling choices. Let's go ahead and move on over to DraftKings, where I don't. Someone want to give me a link or something? I don't. Well, the lineup I usually look at has no contest entered on DraftKings. I don't know. Maybe he went busto for the first time in 4 or 5 years. I can't. Can I just look at a link? Someone in the Slack want to look at the largest tournament, whatever it was, 550K. Download the ownership, the export to CSV button, throw it in the Slack, and I will open it up. That should only take a minute if someone's listening to the sound of my voice, and we can do it that way. But I'm disappointed that my degenerate friend has only played 997 of the last 1,000 nights on DraftKings now. You got to commit to the game, brother. Harkless had a combined 4 blocks and steals with 17 points, hoping for some negative regression. Yeah, I would project him for less than 4 stocks and less than 17 points and shooting less than 60% from the field, and certainly, likely that comes down. But he's still fairly cheap. So it's, and the ownership didn't get out of control. 30 to 40% on the various sites. I'm sitting here. Can anyone download that file and throw it in there? Now that we're locked, the FanDuel lineup I have staring at me, which again I haven't adjusted in a couple hours, but I don't think I would change, is, I can't find it now. I believe it was Curry, McCollum, Clay, some combination of Cantor, Bogut, Hood, Harkless. I don't remember anymore. And the DraftKings one isn't there anymore, so I got nothing. I'm looking though. I'm giving 30 seconds. If someone throws that ownership file in the Slack, I will open it and I will read it out. Several people say, who's getting the ownership file? It's very easy. If you're in the main event on DraftKings, which I presume some 100 people listening to me are, some 25 of which are members at awesemo.com, hit export to CSV. It'll give you a file. Take 8. There we go. I knew we could do it. Alright. Clicking on the link. Thanks very much, ScottyMac777, for responding to my frantic requests. Someone said this is not the largest. Alright, well, we'll look at this one. In this contest, 88% Curry, 64% Lillard, 61% McCollum, 60% Draymond, 59.5% Clay, which still seems too little if dude's going to take shots in the mid-20s. 42% Cantor. 39% Looney. Again, I'd come in under that. 23% Harkless is not that high. I was worried he would get boosted. 23% Iguodala is fine. 22.5% Hood. I'd want more than that. 19% Curry. Seth Curry. Didn't specifically talk about Seth Curry. Was bad. Could have been even worse. He got, I think, a combined 3 steals and blocks, which is really not his want. Played in the teens in minutes. Shot, I think it was 1 for 7 from the field. But there's a fun narrative thing there. If he gets going, the minutes could stretch. Aminu only 18% and change. It's about appropriate. Collins only 16%. I'd be a big fan of having more Zach Collins in that. Bogut only 14%. At $1,400, I'd definitely want more than that. Evan Turner 12.5. I'd probably want more than that. 8.6% Cook, 7%. I'm sorry, 8.6% Bell, 7% Cook, 3% Livingston, 3% McKinney, 0.3 Myers Leonard, 0.17 Damian Lee, 0.13 Damian Jones, 0.09 Jake Layman, 0.04 Kevin Durant, who also was not cheap. Congratulations. You have played yourself. I will be back again tomorrow. Talk more about Brook Lopez and other people in that fascinating series. So, best of luck in your contest tonight. Bonne chance.